What's going on, guys? Welcome to Under Contract Podcast, episode number 3. I have a very special guest here today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come talk with me, Ronnie Matthews. And why don't you just introduce yourself and the companies you're affiliated with and all that?
Okay. Ronnie Matthews, Great American Title is my main business company. I've been in real estate for a long time, and the real estate world's been very kind to me as far as everything from real estate sales to starting a company. We develop subdivisions to owning commercial properties and multifamily and the title company. And the title company's been my main thing over the past dozen years. So that's kind of a quick overview.
Okay. And where are you from originally, and how did you kind of grow up?
I grew up in a small town in Texas. Matter of fact, last weekend before last, just had my 50th high school reunion.
Okay.
So it was a lot of fun. Brownwood, which is kind of out towards Abilene, other side of Austin. You know, it's a little town, so most people don't know where it is.
Right.
But that's where I grew up. Left. I actually dropped out of high school, so I left 6 months before school was out. And Brownwood didn't have opportunities. It's a nice town. I'm glad I grew up there, but I needed to get to where the opportunities were.
Where the population is.
Exactly.
You know, whenever I drive, I went to Texas State University, and when I would drive through those little towns, I thought, man, how does anybody make a living out here?
Right. Farming or an insurance job or et cetera, but you don't advance. I mean, it can be, cost of living's less, obviously, and it's a much slower pace, which I like the fast pace, so that's another reason it wouldn't work for me.
Yeah.
But I had several friends that have been there, never left after high school, and they still live there and love it, and others that left and have retired and come back to Brownwood. So
yeah. Okay, cool. So you said you've been in the industry a long time. What year did you get licensed?
Well, real estate, I actually got licensed in 1972. In those days, you didn't have to take any classes. You just took a test and you were a realtor. And my mother was actually worked for an apartment locator service, and they started requiring them to get a license. So she signed me up. The day before she was going to take her test, she said, "Oh, by the way, I signed you up too." So the next morning I went in, there was a little book to read. I read the book. The next morning I went and I passed, and suddenly I was a real estate agent. I didn't use it. I kept it up. You didn't have any continuing education classes in those days. So I kept it up all those years. Started a construction company in Houston, built it up to a good sized company. And then in the 80s, of course, things crashed. And we did a lot of big work, and builders and developers went out of business, and they didn't worry about paying the plumbing contract. We were plumbing and utility. And so one day I went home to my wife and said, "We're broke. We got to start over." And that was October 1987 is when that happened. And January 1st, 1988, we started in real estate. And, the rest is history to some point.
Yeah.
Our first year in real estate, that was the 80s. So, you were too young to realize what the 80s were like. But
born in 89. So
there you go. So 2008, 9, and 10 was a recession. But relatively speaking, the 80s was almost a depression in Houston. It's not fair to compare it to the Depression days, but half of all the people in Houston were foreclosed on during the 80s. Half.
And those are all homes. Those are all ARMs, right? The adjustable
there was
rate
a
mortgages.
lot of adjustable rates. We didn't have a ton of negative amortization in Texas. That was more a California thing, but there were some very high interest rates. But several 100,000 people in Houston lost their jobs, and at that time we were an oil city, and the oil company jobs went away. Oil prices went down to $12 a barrel. So suddenly we had empty office buildings everywhere. People were leaving town. They couldn't sell their house. So Kathy and I started together, and our first year in real estate, we sold 52 homes.
Wow.
Our average sales price was $50,000.
Yeah.
In Houston in 1988, the average sales price was around $50,000.
Were y'all charging 6% back then?
The real estate fee was 6%. But, if you multiply 52 times 50, it's $2.6 million times 3% is $78,000.
Yeah.
So that was our gross income. We all know how that works. That was gross, not what you make.
Right.
And then the next year, I think we sold 89 or 90 homes, and average price jumped a little bit to 57 or 58. Mm-hmm. Next year, I think we sold 150, and then it grew. And our team, we added people. We started differently than most teams, and now it's funny, the industry's coming our way, but when Kathy and I started, it was her and I immediately, so it was a team immediately. We started together.
Right.
We hired our first assistant, within the first year as an employee, mainly to take care of the office, phone calls, et cetera. And we added, but we grew our team at the largest, it was 21 people, and it was all employees. We had no independent contractors ever. And what that means is I paid everyone that worked there a salary. Mm-hmm. We had, of course, 1, 2, then 3, then finally 4 buyer's agents over the years, and they were paid a salary and a percentage of the commission. As we grew and did better, then we paid medical insurance for our employees.
Oh, wow.
Then we added 401ks for our employees. So we created a real business. And I think that's what too many people in the real estate business don't understand. When you're a real estate agent, you're in business for yourself.
Absolutely.
Basically. So you have to build a business. And to build a business, if you're going to add people, you've got to make it worthwhile to them.
Right.
Over the years, I've talked to people, and they said, I can't get a good buyer's agent. They're turning over. I get someone, and about the time they're good, then they leave. And then I start talking to them about, well, what kind of leads are you giving them? Well, I'm keeping the good ones and giving them the bad ones. You know? Well, you can't expect someone to stay if that's what they're going to get.
For sure.
So if you want to build a business and build a team, you got to look at it from the employees, or if it's independent contractor, and that's a fine structure, but you got to look at it from their perspective too. And yes, you have to make money if you're going to add people, but keep in mind this is the way they're making their living also.
Yeah, for sure. And making a living's not cheap nowadays.
No, it's harder and harder. And the real estate industry is hard now. I mean, it's much harder, obviously, with no inventory to start with.
So I started in 2017,
Yep.
and it was like a perfectly balanced, amazing market. And I walked in, got a couple listings, got a couple buyers. As soon as I started working with a buyer, I could usually get them a home pretty quick. I'm like, man, this is great. This is the funnest job ever. And then 17, 18 was good, 19 was good, 20 was crazy. And then 21 was the first year where I said, okay, I feel a shift for the first time ever in my career.
Yes.
And it was just a kind of a different ball game. I felt like I worked about a time and a half harder for less money.
Yeah.
And then now this year I've never seen anything like this.
I haven't seen anything like this in my career, and I, even before I was actively in real estate in 1988, going back before that, I bought properties and owned properties. I've never seen a market like this, and it's all over the country too. It's not just Houston.
Right.
Everywhere you go, we have property in Arizona, we have property in Utah, and it's just as crazy. Just the numbers are higher, but it's just as crazy. There's no houses for sale, and when they come up, there's multiple offers. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine, a realtor up in the Woodlands, was telling the story the other day. He had a great buyer, $1 million to $2 million price range, and he's made 17 offers.
Oh my God.
And lost every house.
Oh my gosh.
And the last time, I can't remember exact numbers, but the asking price was $1.2 million. They offered $1.45 million. They lost the deal by over $350,000.
Oh my God.
So it's crazy. Now, the only good news about the high prices, you don't have to sell as many homes
Right.
to make your money.
Right.
But obviously real estate fees are under more pressure than they've ever been.
That's correct.
Fighting for listings. I mean, if you get a listing, great. You've got, in the old days, I remember times where it was normal in the early 90s for a house to take 9-10 months to sell.
Wow.
And it used to be, you're luckiest if you're the second or third realtor,
Right.
not the first, because rarely did a house sell, or a high percentage didn't sell in the first time. So nowadays and in those days you always wanted a buyer, because a buyer, you knew you'd find a house, mm-hmm. and you'd make money on it. A listing, there was no guarantee. You'd spend money and time and effort, and if it didn't sell, odds are they changed listings. Now it's, if you have a listing, it's guaranteed money, but a buyer is not.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I'm working with this young couple right now, and we've offered over in Magnolia Creek in League City, we've offered 25, and then I think we offered 30 over asking. And they pretty much, they wouldn't give me too many details, but they pretty much just said it. It wasn't even close.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
So
I would love to see the market even out better.
What do you think the answer to that problem is?
Well, of course, if we enter a recession somewhere down the line, that'll even it out.
Yeah.
As far as I was reading an article today, it said home building construction starts are down substantially across the country, that they're starting to see the interest for buyers. Now, in Houston, it's not, by the way. And how do we eventually build ourselves out of the shortage is build it out. I mean, literally, how do we get out of the shortage of homes? We have to build more homes.
That's what I thought.
That's the only way you're going to get that supply down. There's more people looking for a home than there are homes.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully around the Houston area, we keep building homes. You know, you're in a pretty new community and new homes all around. And like you said, Magnolia Creek. And so it's just more and more homes being built. But with all the construction delays, it's not enough, fast enough anymore.
Right. So you started your team pretty much immediately. It was you and your wife, and then y'all started hiring on the next year. So what was the statistic on how many times y'all were number one in the state of Texas for RE/MAX?
We were number one team in Texas 18 times, 18 years.
Wow.
And I sold my real estate company to my employees 5 years ago.
That was RE/MAX Legends, right?
RE/MAX Legends,
in spring.
And they still use the name Matthews Team. They call it now, Ronnie and Kathy Matthews. But I sold it to the employees. And again, I had employees, and they had worked for me for many years. The second person I hired when we started was still there when I left.
Wow.
As far as 26 years
Hey, in
later.
real estate, that's rare.
That's rare. I had most of the people, matter of fact, the ones I sold it to, all of them had been with me over 12 years, and most of them were over 15 as far as they bought it. But I had so many other interests going, and the title company was growing and taking more and more of my time. I just decided my interests were better spent doing the other things, and I'd sold real estate long enough. I was ready for a change.
Right.
Anyway, so yeah.
So you're not actively like doing listings or anything anymore?
No. Even the last 5 years that I had the real estate company, I just managed the ship. I wasn't involved per se in the real estate transaction, listings, buyers. I mean, I might talk to a client 2 or 3 times a year, and that was it. I mean, and usually that was someone we'd dealt with multiple times in the past, so they knew us personally. Mm-hmm. But I've probably been almost 10 years ago since I went on my last listing appointment.
Wow.
I wouldn't even know how anymore, I think.
Yeah.
So, and there was a time I went on 3, 4, 5 a day, every day, back in the time. And we had generally, in most of our career, we had 200-300 listings. As far as now, my old company now, I think they have 6.
Like per year or active?
Active at any given time.
300 active at one time.
Yeah. Our average, we averaged over 1,000 home sales a year for probably 15 years.
Man, so you're just doing everything at scale, it sounds like.
It was build a company, run a company, and hire people to stick in to take care of things. Because how do you grow in any business? You have to have good people. And by the way, I think too many people are trying to build teams. I think there's nothing wrong with being a good agent dealing with everything, or a good agent with one assistant. Over the years, people, Ronnie, I want to do what you do, but really, most really don't, because they don't want to work that 80 and 90 hours a week that I always worked.
And you manage a bunch of people. It's probably very time consuming. Managing
people. And now in the title company, Great American Title, we have round numbers 170 employees. So, and I started that in 2006 with 5 employees, and over the, past 16 years have grown it up to where it's, like I say, it's almost 165, 170 employees now. And I would say 75% of my time, all the time, is dealing with my employees, keeping them happy, taking care of them, trying to provide them the tools they need, being there to hold their hand if they need hand holding, basically.
Yep.
A lot of good people, as you know, that work for Great American Title. And most of them don't need their hand hold. They just need, if they got an issue, someone to help them resolve the issue. Right. And that's what my job is helping fix things, basically.
Yeah. I feel like that's pretty rare, though, for like a chairman or an owner of a company to be so involved with the people. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what would you tell like me, for example, I've gone back and forth on starting a team and whether that's a route I want to take. What would you say would be what would be some good advice on starting a team, and what kind of personality traits maybe to look for in a buyer's agent or an assistant?
Yep. I would say, first off, and I'll reflect back to when we were doing our thing. Now, I was lucky because when Kathy and I started together, we quickly realized she liked working with buyers, liked showing properties, and I didn't particularly enjoy it. So I did all the listing appointments. She worked with all the buyers. I handled all the contract negotiations, went to all the closings, and she took care of buyers and made them happy and dealt with them what they needed. Mm-hmm. So it was a great match. So our first person we needed was someone to be in the office, to do follow-up, to make those calls, to answer the phone. I mean, just basically someone there, because we were on the road all the time.
And did you have cell phones back then?
We did have cell phones. You didn't, you didn't have internet. You didn't have websites. You sure didn't have any of these other Facebook, et cetera. Matter of fact, when we got in real estate, we were the first real estate agent that had a fax machine. Fax machines were just starting in 1988, and it had the thermal paper. So, and most offices didn't have it. So when you wrote a contract, you typed it or wrote it out, and then you took it and dropped it off to the agent. The agent then would sit down with the people and then counter, and then they would return it to you, and it'd go back and forth.
Yeah.
And then later we started negotiating, and then fax machines became usable. But all of that was long before email.
Yeah.
Et cetera. So,
whereas when I started, they said, hey, here's zip forms, and here's all your contracts are right here, and you can send it for signatures across the country. And
it's so great. Those types of improvements are great. Those were interesting experiences. Many a night, at midnight, I'm dropping a contract into another agent's, mailbox at night so that, they could get it first thing in the morning and start working on it or get it signed.
Yeah.
But just to answer your question, I think everyone has to look at themselves, what they're comfortable with. A lot of people aren't comfortable with managing people at all. So that person shouldn't have employees or shouldn't try to. Or maybe they have a part-time assistant, or maybe they share it with someone else. I think a person has to, first off, getting into real estate, everybody wants to get into real estate because it sounds like it's a lot of fun, and who doesn't like to look at houses? And besides, you sell a $500,000 house at 3%, you're making $15,000. Mm-hmm. I mean, real estate's great. No one realizes how much work there really is involved in it, the investment that goes in it, the time,
the stress,
and the failures.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as far as I used to speak at one of the real estate schools every year, and one year I made the comment to them that looking around this room, 80% of you won't be in real estate 5 years from now.
Right.
Well, I didn't get invited back to talk at the real estate class anymore because those are statistically facts, but that's not, if you're training people and giving them license, and real estate schools are not training you to be a real estate agent. They're teaching you what you need to get a license. After that, it all begins. And it's hard. It's a tough business. It is a hard business. Even in times when the buyer-seller amount of homes was reasonably even, it's a hard business. In today's world, gosh, it's just crazy. So if someone's getting in it, first off, they need to make sure they've got some cash reserves, or they've got an income somewhere that helps them get through those times. Not very many agents get in the business and sell 52 homes like we did, Not very many agents get in the business and sell a home in their first month or 2 months.
Or a year.
I mean, that's right, or 6 months, et cetera. And obviously, if they don't sell a house in a year, then they need to be in another business, basically. But so I think someone has to get in it, start learning, and learn. The big thing is learn. We have too many people in the real estate industry that don't really understand the business. They don't read the contracts or understand the contracts. We got a complaint the other day as somebody was complaining that they paid some fees that they shouldn't have, but the contract clearly stated, the contract in the addendums tells you, as a title company, it's not our decision who pays what.
Right.
It's what was agreed to in that contract. That's the book. That's what you do.
Right.
And so, even when we pointed it out to them, and by the way, the realtor was complaining too, is, well, they shouldn't be paying that. It's like, well, okay, but you had the people sign a contract that says specifically this will be paid by, what will be paid by the buyer? Zero. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? Seller pays all. And it wasn't all closing costs. It had to do with HOA dues and transfer fees and those types of things. And those are tricky items, but that's why someone has to read a contract regularly. Now, I haven't read one in several years because I don't deal with the contract on a daily basis. Back when I was in real estate, then I would read the contract all the time, the updates that came, and I would have my people sit down and we'd go through it, every so often, just read it and explain what that means. And the same thing on listing agreements. If someone's listing a house, then they need to know exactly what the listing agreement says from the first word to the last word,
mm-hmm.
And there's more and more pages and there's more and more addendums and there's seller's disclosures.
It's always something new.
It's always something new. I still read the Realtor magazines that come out. One I like to read, but the Realtor magazines that come out every month, I love reading those because I still learn things and it is relevant to me in my business. So you have to, one, get in and learn the business, start making some sales. When you start getting to the point to where you're making money and you need help, then that's the time to hire someone. And then what do you hire first, or where do you go first? We looked at what our specific needs were and hired for that position. And always along the way, I didn't look and say, okay, now I need 3 buyer's agents. Now I need, or I would look when we were that busy and say, okay, we need another buyer's agent.
Right.
It wasn't, hey, I'm going to add 3 buyer's agents this year. And a lot of teams nowadays, that's the way they grow. And a lot of teams have done really, really well, and numbers are huge. And sometimes it's, are they really a team or are they just a brokerage, type thing?
Right.
But I think each individual person has to decide, where am I weak? Do I really need help? Can I afford help? And then hire for that more than. Now it could very easily be someone like me that said, gosh, I don't like showing houses and it takes too much time away from my business. Mm-hmm. So if I hadn't had Kathy, then probably, yes, my first or second person I would have hired would have been a buyer's agent.
Right.
To feed that off too, so that they could do the showings and that I wouldn't have to do it. So you got to look at, and there's good reasons. It's not always to make more money too. Sometimes it's just to have more time.
Right.
If you're making enough money, then, okay, I'm going to hire someone so I can have more personal time. And that's a very good reason to do. So every time I ever hired someone, I think my income went up. But as far as having more personal time is a very good reason to hire someone.
It keeps you sane, it's I always say it's a marathon, not a sprint. So if you can have anything to extend that,
yes.
Your career and make it more or less stress, then yeah, that's definitely something that makes sense. I want to talk the lead gen with you for a second. What were some things that you did at the beginning of your career? Because there was no internet, there was no cell phones. Yep. And nowadays, there's a lot of agents that pay crazy money to Zillow and Realtor.com, et cetera, yes, for online leads.
Yes.
What were some things you did that you think are still applicable today? And what is your opinion on buying leads like that?
I think that first off, real estate is still a people business. So the more people you let know that you're in real estate, the better your chances of getting business.
Right.
Especially if you conduct yourself in a way that makes them want to do business with you, which means as people that are out in the public, we got to be careful what we do when we're in public. And, when I was young, I liked to party and do all of those things too, but it's not necessarily good for business. Mm-hmm. So we have to think about, one, I just think that everyone that everyone that you run into, one that you run around with, they need to know that you're in real estate. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm in real estate. Hey, I'm Ronnie Matthews. I'm in real estate. And once you get to know people and then get the name, marketing the name. We built a brand in the time it was Ronnie and Kathy Matthews. We were at RE/MAX almost from the very start in my whole career, and my license is still at RE/MAX. But it wasn't RE/MAX that I was building. RE/MAX helped me because it was a name that was known. So when I had no credibility, at least I had a name behind me that did.
Same for me.
And that's it, exactly. And later on, and there, by the way, there's lots of good brokerages and good companies So Remax was the one I chose, but that's not a plus or minus to any of the others, many around. There are lots of good companies. But so first and foremost, let everybody you know, everybody in your sphere, or your family, your church, your gym, any place you go, make sure they know you're in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And let them know that you'd be happy to help them if they ever need to do so. And that's free, by the way. All of that is free. It costs
Absolutely.
nothing to do. When we first started, of course, I mentioned we had a fax. We also had, from our other business, we also had a copy machine. And copy machines weren't in color then those days, by the way. So Kathy would cut and paste. So she'd cut and paste, and we would copy flyers, with our pictures and our names, and go around in our little neighborhood and stick them in everybody's mailbox. By the way, that's against the law. The post office got on us eventually. So we taped them on mailboxes. We put them on doors. We hand delivered them. We had no money, so we had to look for ways that were cheap to try to generate business. We lived in a little community that had 430 homes, Kleinwood. And over the next dozen years, we probably sold 75, 80% of all the homes that sold in that community, because we got out there, they knew, and I had something in common with them. I lived in the same neighborhood.
Right.
I didn't get on the homeowners association because you're automatically going to make half the people mad, and we wanted to sell everybody's houses. So you got to be careful of the things that you get involved with too, because it can hurt your business. Mm-hmm. Also, just like what you say, how you do, where you go, that can hurt your business. So can that. So we didn't have any money. And later on, as we grew and had a little bit of money, then we started doing postcards and mail outs. And in those days, you didn't get 90 pounds of junk in the mail every time you turned around. And people really did check their mail every day. Yeah. And now mail has changed. I think my old office still does some mail outs though, as far as that. Obviously you want to build an information base. Everyone put their information in it. Stay in touch with them in some manner. People that you've worked with before that were happy with your services, ask them for a referral.
Absolutely.
Do you know anyone else that's thinking of buying or selling a home? A lot of people never want to ask for that business.
Right.
They just automatically assume that people know. But if you don't ask for it, I've had people I've asked before and they said, Ronnie, I thought you were probably too busy. Well, I'm never too busy for my business.
I didn't think you want to mess with it.
Yeah, that's right. All of those types of things. Well, it was small and I didn't think you'd want to mess with it. Well, I wanted to sell every house. When I was going on listing appointments, if they listed, I probably got 95% of my listings. When I didn't get one, though, it bugged me. Why didn't I get it?
I'm the same way.
And, I never did. If they'd listed with someone else, I never tried to call them and ask them because it's listed with someone else. I've had people that would call me and tell me, hey, Ronnie, appreciate it. We've decided to go with such and such. And I certainly at that point, I would ask, well, what did I do wrong? What did I? And there was reasons. There was always reasons. But, my wife plays tennis with this lady, for instance, was one that I heard more than once type thing. But you have to go prepared. No matter what you're doing, if you're meeting with a buyer, you have to be prepared. If when we first started showing, there was no GPS or any of that. So key maps, key map was our best friend. There was key maps everywhere. And when you were going to show, Kathy would, because you didn't want people to know you didn't know where you were going. So we'd cut and paste her key map and mark the path out and make little notes. And
wow.
She'd have that to reference, in the side as far as, okay, go here and turn there. So the industry's changed so much. Much of it better. The technology is so much better. The consumer has access to so much more information, which as a realtor, that's good and bad. Because in the early days, if they wanted to buy a house, they had to come to a realtor. In our very early stage, by the way, builders didn't want to work with realtors. So a lot of builders wouldn't pay a real estate fee back in those early days.
Right.
And then it kind of started changing as building picked back up in the 90s. Then it did. And of course, we went through a cycle, last year particularly, where some of the realtors would pay builders would pay almost no fee or very reduced fees.
There was one new construction neighborhood, I think it was out in Roche Sharon, and I had a buyer interested in one of the homes, and they said, hey, sorry, but we're not working with agents.
Yeah.
And it was kind of around the time when all the, like the supply chain stuff started and materials were just through the roof and everything. And I guess they just figured, hey, we need to save every penny we can.
Need to save every penny, and they had more buyers coming through the door than they could build houses for. So it's sort of like, and that tide will change too. Mm-hmm. A lot of the builders never went down that path. We worked a lot with D.R. Horton back in the days and Highland Homes back in the days. And they, I think, have always stayed pretty true to working with realtors and appreciating realtors. Some of the others, changed.
Okay. And you do commercial as well?
I never did commercial. As far as a real estate agent representing someone else, I had to feel like I was qualified. I knew I could give good advice. I had access to information to give good advice. So I never sold commercial property. I've bought a lot of commercial property. As I mentioned earlier, I have a partner and we develop subdivisions. We've developed about, I think, 22 subdivisions. So I've bought a lot of land, but almost all of it was brought to me by a commercial realtor that deals in land. I have ownership in a couple of apartment complexes and shopping centers. But again, I've always worked with a commercial realtor, and just because they know it, I know enough to be dangerous to myself and especially to someone else. And if I step out there and make a mistake that just hurts me, well, that's my problem. But if I'm representing you and we're going to look at a shopping center or something, I don't know the numbers or the statistics well enough. I don't have access to what shopping centers are selling for or what rents should be. So I never felt comfortable really dealing commercial business for someone else.
Right. Yeah, that's commercial is definitely a different animal. I mean, there's whenever I've done a couple really basic commercial listings, like just metal warehouses and stuff like that. Those are easy, but I did my first like triple net lease. It was the end of last year, and man, the fact I was mind blown at the fact that like the air conditioner was the tenant has to maintain it. Like if it goes out, that's on the tenant.
And by the way, the air conditioner is 15 years old, and you're leasing it now, paying top rent. And if it goes out 2 months from now, you got to replace it.
Oh my God!
No, those are the types of things that get complicated. I agree with you. A small individual building, a small warehouse, then okay, we can figure out, and there's no big things that are going to trick us up.
Financials and stuff.
Yes, that's right. When you start representing a tenant, especially a bigger tenant, again, some of the smaller tenants, and they know exactly where they want to be going into it, but understanding the leases, because commercial leases aren't standardized. Yes, Trek has one, but the vast majority of commercial people don't use our Trek forms.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So when you start getting into leasing in a shopping center, landlords generally have their own forms that they use, and their attorneys drew up. And next thing you know, you need an attorney on your side to look it over and question it. And like you say, knowing the triple net is, how did they calculate it? Is it right? Is $26 a foot a fair price for this? Just because that's what they say, then, what's the center across the street charging? Yeah. Which, again, that's why I never did really do it.
Right.
If I were starting over, maybe I would, I always tell people if I were starting over, I'd either be in the mortgage business or in the commercial realtor business. Yeah. Because it's just a different world. And it's not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, like the real estate agent is.
Right. And it's more about, do the numbers make sense or do they not make sense? Yeah. Rather than, does the wife like the paint on the wall, whatever.
That's right. I mean, did somebody walk in and fall in love with it? And that's why, especially in today's market, it's even harder. What's your house worth today? Well, of course, it's always been what willing buyers willing to pay. Of course, subject to appraisals, maybe or maybe not. But putting a price on a house now is harder than it's ever been.
It surprises me every time still. And especially with people waiving appraisals. Yeah. Say you got somebody with money, and say if my neighbor put his house up for sale. So I think I paid $400 for this in 2020. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure it's smaller, but I'm sure it's worth about that. And then if it gets into a bidding war, you get somebody that has some cash and, they pay $475 and waive their appraisal. Yep. That's now a comp. Yep. So that drives all the prices in the whole neighborhood up fairly quickly. I mean, if you get one comp like that, that can change everything.
Especially if there's hardly anything on the market in the community, and that one house comes on the market, sells in a day or two, had 10 offers. Well, that is kind of the new normal for the community, for the subdivision. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe the house was exceptional. Maybe it had the most fabulous pool ever. Maybe it was decorated to the max. Or, of course, in the old days, sometimes somebody's house was not in very good shape, hadn't been taken care of, and it sold cheaper than normal. Well, that would hurt the neighborhood too. Mm-hmm. That would hurt prices. Right now, we're just in a market that everything's just higher.
Right. Wow. So about the title company, you got into that a little bit later. You started in real estate. You got your license in 88, you said?
Got my license in 72, started in real estate in 88.
Right. Okay.
And then in around 2000, I partnered with a buddy, and we started developing subdivisions, bought 50 acres and developed it, built, sold to D.R. Horton and Beezer, I think, were our first two builders that bought lots from us.
So meaning you would buy raw land and then put in the infrastructure?
Put in streets and detention ponds and utilities and sell them finished lots.
To the builder.
The builders would come in, buy the lots, and then start building homes. Didn't have anything to do with home sales itself, just strictly selling finished lots.
From start to finish, how long would it take to get to the point to where from making the purchase of the land to starting to sell lots to a builder? How long did that take?
A year and a half was kind of fairly typical, 2 years sometimes, because you buy the land, and of course, before you due diligence on land, but you got to figure out where you're going to get sewer and water, where you're going to drain to. Those are the three most important things, because if you can't drain it, you can't develop it, especially in Houston. And then where do you get sewer and water? My very first community I developed, I still live in, built our house in 96, and I bought 130 acres, and we developed it into a little gated community with 5-acre lots. So we're up right by the woodlands, and we have 5 acres. My community's gated. There's only 20 homeowners, and, it's just a great community.
Yeah.
So that was easy because we had 5 acres. Each one of us did well in septic. So all I had to do was, we built a gated entrance, build detention, go through getting approvals. You got to run that, get that all approved. And even though we're in Harris County, City of Houston has to approve that too, because you're in their extraterrestrial jurisdiction, ETJ. And, even into Montgomery County, even down into Brazoria County, still even, of course, not so much here. You're in League City, aren't you? So
correct.
League City, you have to get approvals in that city to be able, before you can do anything with your land. So the approval process, then the construction process, year and a half. So we started developing subdivisions, and then, I actually had a friend of mine that had retired as the division president or Texas president for First American Title. Good friend. We're playing golf one day. He says, Ronnie, you should start a title company. I said, I got enough to do. I don't. And anyhow, over the next few months, he taught me into starting a title company. And so one day I said yes, and then it was like, now what? And so we started it, 5 employees. My very first employee still with me all these years later. And it was basically 2 offices. We picked up a little office in Baytown that had 3 people. We had an office where my real estate office was, and had that first employee and an assistant. So I started the office there. So we actually started with 2 offices, 5 employees. Lost money the first couple of years.
Really?
Most of the business was
just learning.
Our Remax business. Well, it's an expensive business to be in. It's a complicated business. Yeah. And nowadays, I have lots of people say, I want to start a title company. To my knowledge, and don't know that it's fact, but I don't think there's ever been a real estate agent that started and built a successful title company in Texas. It's been done in other states because the rules are different and things here. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of realtors now that have some that have chances, maybe. We'll see whether they turn out successful or not, and I hope they do. But we built a good, strong company. But the reason is most real estate agents won't have a title company, but they really don't want to do any work. They just want to make money off of it somehow. Well, I produce some business. I direct a good deal of business. I should make money off of that. First off, the Department of Insurance has very strict rules about what title companies can and can't do. Title company can't in any manner, shape, fashion, or form subsidize or kick back money or pay for things for a producer. That's against the Department of Insurance rules.
Yep.
So as a title company, and there's been many fined over the years, there's more that should be fined and probably will, one day as they get caught. But to start a legitimate title company, it's very expensive. I mean, and title company employees are well paid and all full benefits and insurance and 401ks. And so, I think we spend over $1 million a month.
Oh my God.
On insurance.
On insurance.
Is that right? 160 employees, 160,000. So we spend $1.2 million, $1.3 million a year just on insurance.
God.
So, that becomes very expensive. So even though I was a big producer and selling over 1,000 homes and being able to direct most of that to the title company, we lost money the first 3 years, I think. Then I added a couple of employees, and then, we grew. And I said 2006 is when, of course, about the time we're starting to grow a little bit, 2008 hits, and 2009 and 2010. Now, we actually grew through that time. So, I went into it with 7 or 8 employees, and at 2010, I had 20 or so because other companies had either shut or closed down offices, and I was able to pick up some really good employees. And so we actually grew through that downturn. Didn't make much money, but we were building for something. And then after the economy turned around, we've been very fortunate in growing commercial business. We started really growing 6 or 7 years ago, and it's been very good to us. And just, looking for ways to grow and support our people. That's what I do.
Yeah, I feel like title's pretty tough as well. It's kind of like being a realtor. Like there's never been more realtors than there are right now. There's probably never been more title companies. So to get into the business and make a name for yourself, going and doing, dropping off breakfast tacos at the real estate offices and stuff like that, I bet it's a hard grind.
It is. And, you got to get in front. The good news from a title business, then I know, okay, who has business? Who do I go call on? Okay, I know Blake, he does some business. Maybe I go meet Blake, and maybe he'll help direct business to me. Mortgage companies, banks, et cetera. We don't go out directly to the consumer. We're the real estate agent, where's my next deal coming from? There's a lot of people who live in this neighborhood. I know someone wants to sell, but how am I the one they choose? And there is a little difference. Mortgage company, the same thing. They know, okay, if I call on realtors, they're going to get deals and maybe they'll use me. But as a real estate agent, it's different. Title company, it was that way. But yes, there's more title companies than there have ever been that I'm aware of, at least in my time in Houston. Nowadays, I've heard of 2 or 3 coming up now that are Mark Zucker, you were talking about him, Zuckerberg earlier, they're meta title companies. They don't have offices,
Right, like a cloud title company.
Cloud title companies. And, I don't know. Maybe one day that'll be the case. But now, first off, most deals still have to have somebody actually physically sign something. When you can get to the point where you can DocuSign all your documents, well then, okay, how many locations will you need then? But in today's world, someone comes in and tells me they're a, online title company and, everybody works from home. I don't know. That would make me a little nervous.
Yeah. And as a realtor, if you're trying to get me to give you my listings or whatever, if you're not a person I can talk to in person, like we're talking to right now, or you don't have an office I can go to or whatever, if you're just a screen, there's not a lot of incentive for me there.
No, I don't see how that, and a lot of them are throwing out things that, they won't charge an escrow fee or they won't do this or that. Well, of course they have no overhead. They don't have an office. All of our offices are expensive, and then all the operations of the office and things. So, there are things, the title policy and premiums are the same for all of us. All of us charge the same there. That's set by the state,
right?
Department of Insurance. So, what varies in cost? Well, okay, escrow fees, and they're a necessary expense to operate, basically. Now, if you get rid of all your offices and everybody's working from home, okay, I guess your expenses are way down. But again, as you said, if I can't walk in and see someone, I can't go meet my person, it doesn't make me feel real good, you know?
Yeah.
My financial planner, I can go meet him. It's not all online. My insurance guy, I know him. I can go meet him and do, once a year. And you go down the list of everybody I deal with. I don't want to deal with someone that's just, all I can do is talk to them on the phone.
Yeah, you want some depth to those relationships. You don't want it to be just surface level and we're just doing business together. And it's cool to be friends with the people you work with.
Yes,
it makes it a lot easier.
Every friend I have, I've made in the real estate world.
Yeah.
It's somebody that I've worked with, dealt with, those types of things. It's every friend I have. That's where they came from, is people that I met in the real estate world.
Right. How many locations do y'all have now?
We have 13. We're actually the third largest title company in Houston. As far as we closed last year, I think it was around 14,000 transactions.
Wow.
So we're closing over 1,000, typical month, we're closing over 1,000 properties per month. Houses, commercial, land, lots, all of those things. We don't close many lots, but as far as land and developments and all of those things, over 1,000 a month. And so we're very proud of the fact that we are the third largest, ranked by the Houston Business Journal. So we'll use that. And it's something, truthfully, as a little guy, I'm proud that I was able to build something like that.
Yeah. And it's impressive. So I got to ask, for a man juggling so many things at once, what is like a normal weekday for you look like? Like, what's kind of your routine?
Well, I can tell you, first thing is I walk out the door at 6:30 every morning. I'm out the door. 3 days a week I go to the gym and, get there a little before 7, leave at 8:05, and then go. Tuesday mornings, and that's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesday mornings, I have a little men's group, prayer group that we meet, and we meet at 7:30. I'm there at 7, just because I walked out the door at 6:30. And then Thursdays is I usually get to the office about 6:30, 6:45. And that's a day I really get caught up on things. Every day is different. Today was a gym day, into the office for a couple hours, drove down to, we've got training going on for our group over here on NASA 1. And so went in and talked to them at lunch, had lunch with about 30 employees that were there, came by here. When I leave here, I'm going to stop in one of my other offices, and at 5:30 this evening, I have an event to go to, a grand opening on one of our apartment complexes. I rarely get home before 7 p.m. And is that all work? It's all work related. Tomorrow afternoon, I'm playing golf with 3 clients.
Yeah.
And I always tell my crew, it's not fun, it's work. Well, yeah, okay, I do have some fun.
Yeah.
But it's still work related. These are 3 customers of mine that I'm taking them out to play golf, and we're going to play golf and have a good time.
Well, to get to where you're at, there's, people say work-life balance. Mm-hmm. I don't really buy that. To get to that crazy high level of just being a super high performance person, there's not going to be a lot of balance, unfortunately.
That is unfortunate. You're right. Exactly. Through most of our real estate, my life is more balanced now than it's ever been. But as far as for 20, even before that, when I was in the construction business, I averaged 100 hours a week. My work week there, 6.5 days a week I was working. Sunday mornings were a little slower, and sometimes I made it to church, sometimes I didn't, I got to admit. But as far as, and over the time now, now my average week is probably 60, 65 hours a week. But most of my life, unfortunately, because we lost a lot of, we had opportunities to make some really good friends, had more time that we should have spent with our family. But, I just was driven. I'm still driven. I have to do it. And
you have to do it.
I have to do it.
You don't have a choice.
I can't turn it off. I have to do it.
Yeah.
So, but I enjoy it, thankfully.
What do you attribute that to, like your work ethic? Was that something your parents taught you, or?
I think as far as one, I grew up very poor. My family never owned a home until I bought my parents a home many years later. My stepfather, who was my father as far as I ever knew, but he was an alcoholic. He didn't work regularly. My mom had to carry everything. So, I guess I have to blame my mom. She's the one that, that's what she did, whatever it took
Yeah.
And so I think that came from it. I have a brother and a sister. My brother has been the perfect example of steady. I mean, he's been married, he married a girl at 20. And so 43 years later, still married, had one daughter, and worked more or less for the same company. He's an electrician, and then worked his way up into management. And his company was sold 3 times, but he was there, I think, 40 years. My sister's a little bit in between us. I was the one that I was the risk taker. I was the one that had to take chances, and I was the one that worked the most.
Yeah. It's crazy. Those formative years of childhood, like you said, y'all were poor and everything. I think the frontal cortex is kind of put together, and even though you're where you're at now, I think you still probably feel a little bit of that, how you felt back then, maybe.
Yeah, I think, and the good news is now it's more fun and more enjoyable. Not that there's not some rough days, because there is, as far as what the heck am I doing? Why am I doing this? But I've never been one that dwelled on things. I've made probably more mistakes than anyone, but I make lots of decisions. So.
The most successful people say that.
Yeah. You don't, and when you make a mistake, you have to make it right and move on. Don't let it eat at you, because if you let it eat at you, then it'll drag you down. And so I spoke one time to a big group. It's actually Keller Williams Maniac deal that they call it, mega camp or whatever they called it. And, I think there was 10,000 people, and Gary Keller was interviewing me, and he said, Ronnie, what are some of the mistakes you made that you would tell people? And I said, Gary, I don't remember my mistakes. I mean, because I don't dwell on them. It's part of making a decision, and you make a mistake, you fix it, you move on. And of course, Kathy was down in the stand. I said, but my wife is right down there. I bet you can ask her, and she'll tell you a few dozen of them. but I mean, I literally am that way. I'm just not geared to dwell on something.
Yeah.
I do the very best I can all the time. And once you do that, then, you just live with the consequences, basically.
Yeah. So this is I'm just kind of curious. What are some transactions that you were a part of as an agent that you were most proud of?
I would say, and it may sound like a cop-out, but really I think we were proud of all of them, because it's how important it is that what we're involved in. When you've got someone entrusting you to find them the home, or sell their home, or help them get into a home, that's terribly critical to them. And we tried literally to treat everyone the same, no matter what the price.
Right.
If it was, matter of fact, some of the times Kathy showing buyers that were the lowest price buyers was the ones she might show 50 houses to back when there was lots of houses for sale in the early 90s. But she felt for them. She wanted to help them. Now I might have kicked them to the curb personally, but as far as she couldn't do that, she kept doing it. So put me on the spot right now. I can't think of one that I think is just extra special, because they were all special. And anytime like I said earlier, if I lost a listing, it bothered me. I got over it quickly, but it still bothered me, because why didn't I get that one?
Yeah. And to hear you say that you have lost listings before, it's almost makes me feel better, because last year I had a couple where I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like the appointment went perfectly.
Yep.
It was just we're going to let you know, and we're going to talk about it. And I don't ever really feel comfortable asking, hey, am I competing with another agent? Or you interviewing multiple agents? So I just try to do my best, but man, it stings whenever they call and say they went with someone else.
I never asked if they were meeting with someone else. A lot of times we knew it, because they would say up front when they were setting an appointment or something that way. But I never asked. I just always went in and assumed that I was going to get the deal. And, I went prepared to list their house right then, papers drawn. It's easier now with digital, but back in the days, we typed up a set of listing papers for every listing. I carried out a package.
I take my listing agreement. I mean, a lot of times they will just say, well, what do we got to do?
Let's go.
Here you go.
Bam. And then nothing would be worse than to say, oh, well, I'll have to get papers drawn up and back to you. Well, first off, it shows you wasn't prepared to go. So yes, no one's going to get them all. And once I hired people to start doing it, well, then our percentage dropped, as far as, where, like I say, when I was going on listings and people actually listed, because, there's always people that talk about it and then maybe it's a year or two. But if they listed, we were in the 90s as far as percentage of listings. When I hired someone to start doing that, and that was the last thing I gave up as a realtor, was the listing appointments. then, that number dropped down to 70 or so. And, and had a really good person doing it. Matter of fact, 18 years later, he's still doing it for the company. So he was really good at it. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same as my name was the Nan, I was the brand. And so he didn't get as many of them. Mm-hmm. But, suddenly I could do lots more things. Why do you give it up if you know you're going to get less? Well, because I got more in the long run, because he could devote 100% of his time to that. And that's what he did generally. I mean, like I say, for many years, he went 3, 4, 5 listings a day, every day. Not anymore.
That's crazy.
I don't know how many he goes on now because I don't see him.
Do you, did you ever do any of that, like buying leads from Zillow or any of that?
I did try Zillow a few times, because they were kind of getting started good. And I watched it. I know a lot of people that buy Zillow's leads and a lot of them that spend big money on it, and they don't make money on it. And why did they do it? They do it for rankings. They do it for this. They do it for that. I try to never do anything that doesn't make a profit. You're in business to make a profit.
Right.
So I bought Zillow leads, and there was, one year it did really well where, okay, I don't remember the numbers, spent $20,000 in the year and made $80,000 off of it. Well, okay, that is justifiable. Mm-hmm. The next year, I think, spent $25,000 and it generated $25,000 in revenue. But I lost money because there was people to be paid. There was things to handle. And so I stopped it. Mm-hmm. And then, a few years later it changed. We tried, and it's sort of the same thing. Made money the first year, didn't the second year. And I don't know if the group still buys Zillow leads or not now. But I went in and out. I mean, I think you try everything. Mm-hmm. And when you try something, you got to be patient. You got to commit to, okay, you can't say I'm going to buy leads for 2 months and then, oops, I didn't get anything. So when you do it, you have to budget accordingly and say, okay, I'm going to try this for 6 months and then see if it starts rolling. And then you have to look at yourself too with Zillow leads. Of course, my days, there was a lot of junk, a lot of stuff that, didn't know they were even being sent over type thing.
Right.
Shocked. Well, who are you? Why are you calling me? Oh, I was just looking online. But you got to make sure that somebody's following up on those, because if you're not, well, then guess what? It won't convert. If you call 100 and you convert 5 out of 100, great. But if you only call 10 out of 100, well, then how many are you going to convert out of that 10? Maybe none.
Likely none.
And it wasn't Zillow's fault. It was actually, your fault for not following up on it. Mm-hmm. And I know there's lots of other places selling leads now. I haven't had experience with those. I think if I were now, social media is an important part of everything nowadays. If I were starting now and growing, I would certainly get to know the social media world. Facebook, I have a Facebook page. I never look at it, basically. Some high school friends, communicate back and forth with me. Every now and then I'll share something. But as far as if I were building a Facebook page as a real estate agent, one, I wouldn't have any realtors as my friends. And I say that because all of my friends are realtors.
Right.
But realtors aren't buying or selling through you. So if you're going to build that, then make it consumers that might do it. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of people's pages and 90% of their friends are other realtors. Well, that's good for a social environment, but if you're looking to build business from it, then, again, and I haven't done it because, I'm not in that business anymore. But if I were building a Facebook page or Twitter or anything else, then I would try to 100% make it non-realtors, because now I got a chance of getting business from them.
Man, I'm about to just go delete all my realtor friends.
And that may be the wrong thing. I'm just telling you what I would do.
Right.
And by the way, over the years, I've worked with lots of agents, and we all do things differently, and it all turns out really good because how we think, what we are willing to do, can do, are different. So we have to look at things that work for us.
Right.
It may be great, some of these attractive ladies and it always doing shots of themselves and showing their purse or their clothes and things that way. Nobody wants to see my Wranglers, and I'm not particularly attracted to be on air all the time. So we have to do what works for us. Mm-hmm. and then keep trying till you find the thing that works. And when it works, keep doing it over and over and over.
Yeah. For consistency, consistency is the number one thing, I think. So, and I've been guilty of it too. Sometimes you make a plan and you come out,
firing,
come out firing on all cylinders, and it's to be more sustainable through the long run is very tough.
Over the years, realtors you see a lot of realtors have a great month or two, then a dead month or two, big dead. And I looked at it long ago, and it's because they would work like crazy to generate business, but then they would get so busy in the business, they quit working like crazy to build more business. So some way, fashion, or form, you have to always be looking for new business. Mm-hmm. No matter how busy you are, you got to be looking for new business. How can I get more business? How can I get new business? Where am I going to get new business? And be trying it and think about it. Back in our days, of course, the builder department, there was a couple of us that kind of were the first ones that generated builder deals where you worked with a builder and they'd refer you business and those things. And there was 2 or 3 of us that kind of started that business. Joe Rothschild and myself were kind of the first, and then Jimmy Franklin and others grew from it. And now everybody does, has a connection. And now, of course, the builders aren't doing it much. But when we were doing our maximum homes, I think our biggest year ever was 1,600 homes that we sold. But it was, we had a lot of builder-generated business. We had a couple of good relocation companies that referred us business. And then we had what we called our normal business. Our biggest year ever was 2000, I don't remember the exact year, 12 or so. And we connected with a hedge fund from a referral. And actually, it's interesting because from a property management guy, when we had people that wanted property management, I never did that. And I would refer it to this guy, and he would always offer to pay me, and I'd always said no. He's not making that much money anyway, and it's hard. So I always said no. Well, one day he called me, and he said, "Hey, Ronnie, I've got these people. Our company's working with them in Dallas, but we don't have anyone in Houston. We don't, and I'd like to refer you to this group, and they're buying a lot of houses." And turned out to be a hedge fund. And in a 2-year period, they bought almost 600 homes.
Oh, my gosh.
And I had one person that handled all of that, one person, because we didn't have to show them. They told us what we wanted. We structured it where it did automatic searches. They were in England, so that they'd get the searches, our nighttime. And when that one person would walk in, she'd have a list of homes that they wanted to make offers on. And we'd make offers. And the property management company was going to manage all the properties. They would actually go look at the property, so we didn't even have to coordinate that. They went and looked at the properties. We did our rental numbers. They did their rental numbers. As long as the rental numbers worked in their formula, they bought the house. They were all cash. And so right at 600 homes in just under 2 years.
Yeah. So that was kind of like an iBuyer before iBuyers.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And there's still a lot of hedge funds buying properties now. What is it, BlackRock or Blackstone, one of those companies that owns 80,000 homes. And of course, the iBuyers are buying and then doing minimal repairs and reselling. None of them make money, by the way. They're all losing money.
Yeah, a lot of them have stopped.
Well, of course, Zillow quit because they were losing, $6,000 per house they bought or something that way. So at some point, and of course, if we do hit a recession and they've got a big backlog of houses, they're going to bleed. But those hedge funds are buying a lot of their houses. So, when they Open Door buys houses, they kind of have a connection and a certain amount of Open Door, Offer Pad, whichever ones. But they sell a lot of their properties to those hedge funds. And now we have rental communities being built in the Houston area where they come in and buy land and build every house. They like about 200 in a community, and then they keep and own and rent all the houses.
Yeah.
It's like an apartment complex, except you got individual houses.
You got a backyard.
Home ownership is, is shrinking as far as the percentage of home ownership, and is going to continue to shrink.
I've heard that multifamily new construction is like way outpacing single family.
Yes, and it's interesting because I am involved in a few different good-sized apartment complexes. The cost right now, one that we're starting down at Jordan Ranch, and I'm a small investor in that one, but we had to go back and reprice it 3 times because the cost kept going up.
Right.
and you're always looking at rents. Well, okay. And by the way, you're 2 years away from, okay, I started now. I'm 2 years away or year and a half away from getting it started leasing where rent's going to be. Although I did see today lumber prices have dropped pretty dramatically in the past couple of months. Mm-hmm. So in our case, for those apartments, it may work out good for me and for us. But now will rents, when we get the houses finished, apartments finished, are the rents going to still be where we think they are now? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've had some new construction clients that closed like fall of this last year, and the same floor plan right next door to theirs is now 50 more thousand.
Yeah. Yeah. 10% or 15% more. Mm-hmm. We're buying a house over in Austin for one of our nieces, going to lease it to her. She lives over there. Can't afford to buy a home. Taylor Morrison is building it for us. I think our contract last October was $575, and the house they hadn't even started sheetrocking yet because of all the construction delays. The lady I was talking to, the Taylor Morrison salesperson, she said she sold the same floor plan just recently, $645. So that's almost 15% up, and our house is not even finished yet.
Yeah.
I keep kidding my niece. Gosh, sorry, but I'm going to have to sell this thing. But obviously my wife won't let me do that.
Yeah. So. Well, shoot, man, we're a little over an hour now.
Wow.
I know you're a busy man. You got places to be, people to see. Really appreciate you doing this. You came and talked at our office at Remax 5-Star, Kimberly.
Yes.
And she always had great things to say about you. And I have a lot of respect for the business you've built. And this has been an absolute pleasure just being able to pick your brain.
Good. Well, I would say real estate is a great business. It's a great industry. You have to work at it. There's no easy way. But if you stay with it, you stay focused, you keep pushing, you do the right thing, get yourself more and more educated so you are a good representative for buyers and sellers, then, I guess I'm an example of it can be a very good career. It can be a very good business and very enjoyable too, and made a lot of good friends over the way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Blake, it was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else you want to add?
Nope. Just close at Great American Title Company. Go out there and sell something and close at Great American Title Company.
I'm closing one hopefully this coming Wednesday at Great American Title. So
Good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man.
Good luck.